They called me useless at dinner. So I stopped paying the bills. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Storyova, where real emotions meet unforgettable stories. If you've ever felt underestimated, overlooked, or taken for granted, then today's story is going to hit close to home. Let's get into it. I didn't think a single word could change everything. Useless. It wasn't shouted. It wasn't even said with anger. That's what made it worse. It was casual, dismissive, like a fact everyone at the table had silently agreed on long before. I walked into the room. It happened at dinner. We were all sitting around the table, my parents, my older brother Daniel, his wife, and me. It was supposed to be a normal family dinner. Nothing special. Just food, small talk, the usual. But something about that night felt off. Maybe it was the way Daniel kept smirking every time I spoke. Or the way my mom kept sighing like I was an inconvenience just for being there. I tried to ignore it. I always did. I had gotten good at ignoring things. But then my dad asked the question. So, what are your plans now? Simple question, right? Except it wasn't. Because plans implied direction, progress, something tangible. And at that moment, I didn't have anything impressive to offer. I'm still working on it, I said carefully. I've been applying to a few places. And I'm thinking about taking an online course. Daniel laughed. Not a small chuckle. Not a polite reaction. A full, loud laugh that cut straight through me. Still working on it. He repeated, Man, you've been working on it for years. I felt my face heat up, but I tried to stay calm. I just haven't found the right what? He interrupted. The right excuse? My mom shook her head. Your brother is right, she said. At some point, you have to stop dreaming and start doing something real. I am doing something, I said, my voice tightening. You just don't see it, because there's nothing to see. Daniel shot back, and then it came. That one word, useless. It was my dad. He didn't even look at me when he said it. He just took another bite of his food, like he hadn't just dropped a bomb in the middle of the room. Silence followed. Heavy, suffocating silence. I looked around the table, waiting, hoping someone would say something. That someone would correct him. Defend me. No one did. Not my mom. Not Daniel. Not even his wife, who suddenly found her plate. Very interesting. That's when it hit me. It wasn't just a word, it was a verdict, and everyone there had already agreed with it. I swallowed hard, forcing myself not to react, not to give them the satisfaction. Okay, I said quietly. Just one word. But it carried more weight than anything else I could have said, because in that moment, something inside me shifted. I stopped trying to prove myself to them. I stopped explaining. I stopped caring what they thought. And most importantly, I stopped paying the bills down. Now, that probably sounds dramatic, petty. Even, but let me explain. For the past 3 years, I had been the one quietly holding everything together. After my dad's business took a hit and Daniel decided to focus on his own family, a lot of the financial pressure fell. Somewhere, and that somewhere was me. I didn't have a flashy job. I didn't have a big title, but I worked. Freelance projects. Late nights. Small gigs that slowly added up. It wasn't glamorous, but it was enough. Enough. To cover the electricity bill when my parents forgot. Enough. To pay for groceries when things got tight. Enough. To fix things around the house without making a big deal about it. I never told them. Not because I wanted praise, but because I didn't think it mattered. I thought, family just helps each other. No scoreboard. No announcements. Just support. But sitting at that dinner table, hearing that word useless, I realized something. They didn't see me. They didn't know what I did. And worse, they didn't care. So I made a decision. If I was useless in their eyes, then I would stop being useful completely the next morning. I woke up early, same as always. But instead of checking the bills, instead of making sure everything was covered, I just didn't. I made my coffee, sat by the window, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel responsible for anything except myself. It felt strange, uncomfortable. Even like I was forgetting something important, but I wasn't. I was just finally letting go. Days passed, then a week. At first, nothing changed. The lights stayed on. The fridge was full. Everything looked normal. But behind the scenes, things were starting to crack. The first sign came when my mom mentioned the electricity bill. Did anyone pay this? She asked one evening. Daniel shrugged. Not me. My dad frowned. I thought you handled that? They looked at each other. Then, slowly, they looked at me. I kept my eyes on my phone. Silent. Double quotes. What about you? My mom asked. I shrugged. Why would I pay it? Her eyebrows pulled together. What do you mean? Why? You've been handling these things, haven't you? I looked up. Met her gaze. Have I? The room went quiet. It wasn't confrontation. It wasn't anger. It was something worse. It was realization. You never said anything, my dad muttered. You never asked. I replied. Another silence. This one heavier than the last. Fine, Daniel said, standing up. I'll take care of it. And just like that, the responsibility shifted, or at least, they thought it did, because what they didn't realize was how much I had been covering. Not just one bill, not just occasionally, but consistently. Quietly. Without recognition. And without complaint. That week, the internet got cut off. Daniel had forgotten to pay it. The following week, groceries ran low. My mom started making smaller meals. Then came the water bill. Late notice, penalty fees. Tension started building. You could feel it in the air, in the way conversations became shorter. In the way my dad started checking his bank account more often, in the way Daniel began coming over less frequently, and through all of it, I stayed quiet. I didn't step in. I didn't fix it. Because every time I felt that urge to help, to smooth things over, I remembered that dinner, that word, useless, and I reminded myself, you don't get to be invisible and essential at the same time. Eventually, it reached a breaking point. One night, the power actually went out. Darkness filled the house. My mom panicked. What happened? My dad rushed to check the fuse box. It's not the fuse, he said. We must have missed a payment. Missed a payment. She snapped. How do you miss a payment? All eyes turned to Daniel. Don't look at me, he said defensively. I told you I'd handle it, not that I'd babysit everything. Well, clearly someone needs to. The argument escalated quickly. Voices raised, blame thrown, and in the middle of it all, I sat there. In the dark, silent, watching. It wasn't satisfying, not really. It was clarifying. Because, for the first time, they were experiencing what I had been quietly preventing all along. The chaos, the stress, the consequences of neglect. Finally, my dad turned to me. Why didn't you say anything? I looked at him. Really looked at him, and I asked a simple question. Would it have mattered? He opened his mouth, then closed it, because he didn't have an answer. None of them did. That night changed everything, not because of the power outage, but because of what followed. The next morning, my mom knocked on my door. Softly, hesitantly. Can we talk? I hesitated for a moment, then nodded. She sat on the edge of my bed, looking smaller than usual. Less certain. We didn't know, she said quietly. I know, I replied. Why didn't you tell us? I thought about that, really thought about it, because I didn't think I had to, I said. I thought it was obvious. She shook her head. It wasn't. Then there it was, the truth. Simple, uncomfortable, real. I'm sorry, she added. The words felt unfamiliar, like they had weight she wasn't used to carrying. I shouldn't have said those things. None of us should have. I nodded, but I didn't rush to forgive, because this wasn't about one apology. It was about years of being overlooked, years of being the quiet support system no one Acknowledged, I'm not useless. I said, I know. She replied quickly, but I shook my head. No, you're saying that now. But you didn't know it then. And that's the problem. She didn't argue. She couldn't. Because deep down, she knew I was right. That day, things started to change. Not overnight, not perfectly, but slowly. My dad sat me down later that evening. We need to understand everything you've been handling, he said. So I told them, not dramatically, not emotionally, just facts, bills, payments, dates, amounts, the full picture. And as I spoke, I watched their expressions shift, confusion, surprise, guilt, because the truth was undeniable. I hadn't been useless. I had been essential. They just never bothered to notice. Daniel showed up the next day. Different attitude, less arrogance. Why didn't you say something, man? He asked. I shrugged. Would you have listened? He didn't answer, because he knew he wouldn't have. That was the hardest part for them to accept. Not that they were wrong, but that they had never even tried to be right. From that point on, things were divided properly. Responsibilities were shared, conversations were clearer, and for the first time, I wasn't invisible anymore. But here's the thing, the real change didn't happen in them. It happened in me. I stopped seeking validation from people who hadn't earned the right to define my worth. I stopped proving myself through silent sacrifice. And I started setting boundaries, real ones. Because respect isn't something you beg for, it's something you enforce. And sometimes, the only way people understand your value is when they have to live without it. So if you've ever been called useless, if you've ever felt unseen, unappreciated, or dismissed, remember this: your value isn't determined by who notices it. It's determined by what you bring to the table. And if they can't see it, maybe it's time to stop serving them. But the story doesn't end there, because real change doesn't happen in one conversation. It happens in the moments that follow. The quiet ones, the uncomfortable ones, the ones where habits are tested. At first, things felt awkward, like we were all actors trying to remember new roles in a play we never rehearsed for. My mom started asking questions she never asked before. Did you eat? Are you working today? Do you need anything? They sounded simple, but to me, they felt foreign, not because I didn't want to hear them, but because I wasn't used to being considered. My dad became more involved too. He started sitting down with bills spread across the table, actually reading them instead of assuming they'd magically be handled. Sometimes he'd call me over. Can you explain this one? And I would. Not because I had to, but because now I chose to. That was the difference. Before, everything I did came from obligation. Now, it came from decision, and that made it lighter, cleaner, healthier. Daniel, though, he struggled the most, not with the bills, not with the responsibilities, but with his ego. For years, he had been the successful one, the one everyone pointed to with pride, the one who made it. And now, suddenly, there was a crack in that image. A realization that while he was busy building his own life, someone else had been quietly holding together the foundation he stood on. He didn't say much at first, but I noticed the change. The way he listened more, the way he interrupted less, the way his jokes, those sharp, cutting remarks, started to disappear, until one evening, he showed up unannounced, just like old times. Except this time, he didn't walk in like he owned the place. He knocked. I opened the door. We stood there for a second, awkward, uncertain. Hey, he said. Hey. He scratched the back of his neck. Can we talk? I stepped aside. Yeah. We sat in the living room, same couch, same space where we'd spent years watching TV, arguing, laughing, pretending everything was fine. But this time, it felt different, more real. I've been thinking, he started. That alone caught my attention. Daniel wasn't the thinking type. At least, not out loud. I messed up. He said, simple, direct, no excuses, no jokes, just truth. I didn't respond right away, not because I wanted to make it dramatic, but because I wanted to hear what came next. I always thought, he continued, then paused. I always thought I was the one carrying things. You know? The one everyone depended on. I nodded slowly. Yeah, I know, but I wasn't, he said, his voice quieter now. Not really. Not here. Silence settled between us, not heavy this time, just honest. I didn't see you, he admitted. And that's on me. I leaned back, taking that in, because that's right, there was something I never expected to hear. Not from him, not from anyone. I should have. He added, "You're my brother." I exhaled slowly. You should have. I agreed. No anger, no raised voice, just truth meeting truth. And for once, it didn't turn into a fight. I can't change the past, he said. No, I replied. You can't. But I can do better. I looked at him, really looked at him, trying to figure out if this was just another moment. Or something real. Something lasting. Then do it. I said, no big speech. No dramatic forgiveness. Just a simple challenge. And for the first time in a long time, Daniel nodded without arguing. I will. And he did. Not perfectly, not instantly, but consistently. He started showing up more, helping out, checking in, not just with the house, but with me. Need help with anything? You good? Want to grab food? Small things, but they added up, because effort's real. Effort is louder than any apology. Weeks turned into months, and slowly, the house felt different, lighter, more balanced, not because everything was perfect, but because everything was shared. Responsibility, respect, awareness. We weren't just living together anymore. We were actually functioning as a family. But the biggest shift, it was inside me. For years, I had tied my worth to what I could do for others. If I wasn't helping, if I wasn't fixing something, if I wasn't contributing in a visible way, I felt like I didn't matter. That dinner exposed something painful, but necessary. I had allowed myself to become invisible, not just to them, but to myself. I minimized my own efforts, downplayed my own value, stayed quiet when I should have spoken. Why? Because I thought that's what made me good. Easy. Low maintenance. But all it did was make it easier for people to overlook me, and that had to change. So I started doing something new. Something uncomfortable. I started speaking up, not aggressively, not defensively, just honestly. When something felt unfair, I said it. When I needed help, I asked for it. When I contributed, I didn't hide it, not to brag, but to be seen, because being seen isn't arrogance, it's clarity. And slowly, that clarity reshaped everything, even outside the house. I started approaching my work differently too. For the longest time, I treated my freelance jobs like they were temporary, like they didn't count, like they were just placeholders until something real came along. But what if they were real? What if the problem wasn't the work, but the way I viewed it? So I leaned into it, took it seriously, raised my rates. Set boundaries with clients, stopped undervaluing my time, and something surprising happened. People responded. Better. Clients. Better opportunities. Better respect. Because the way you treat your own value teaches others how to treat it too. It wasn't instant success, but it was progress. Real, measurable progress. And for the first time, I felt in control of my own direction. Not just reacting to life, but shaping it, one decision at a time. Then one day, something unexpected happened. We had another family dinner, same table, same setup, but a completely different energy. No tension, no judgment, hanging in the air, just normal. We were eating, talking, even laughing, and at one point my dad looked at me. Your work's been going well, right? I nodded. Yeah, it has. He smiled. A real one. That's good. I'm proud of you. It was a simple sentence. 7 words. But they carried more weight than anything he'd ever said before. Because this time, it felt earned, not because I needed his approval, but because it came from understanding, from awareness, from finally seeing me for who I actually was, not who they assumed I was. And in that moment, I realized something important. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about proving them wrong. It was about correcting a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding that existed because I never spoke up, and they never looked closely enough. Both sides played a role, and both sides had to change. But not everyone gets that outcome. Not every family listens. Not every apology comes. Not every situation resolves cleanly, and that's the truth. Sometimes people won't change. Sometimes they'll keep underestimating you, keep dismissing you, keep calling you useless, in ways that don't always sound like that exact word. And when that happens, you have a choice. You can keep proving your value to people who refuse to see it, or you can start redirecting that energy toward yourself, toward building something that doesn't rely on their validation. Because at the end of the day, your worth isn't a debate. It's not something others get to vote on. It's something you define through your actions, your boundaries, your decisions. And sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop overgiving in places that underappreciate you. Not out of spite, but out of self-respect. Because once you stop pouring into a space that doesn't recognize your value, you finally have the capacity to pour into one that does. So if you're sitting there right now, feeling overlooked, feeling dismissed, feeling like no matter what you do, it's never enough, hear this clearly. You are not useless. You've just been surrounded by people who got used to your effort without ever acknowledging it. And the moment you step back, the moment you reclaim your time, your energy, your worth, that's when everything starts to shift. Maybe not for them, but for you. And that's where it matters most. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. This is Storyova, where stories aren't just told, they're felt. And if this one stayed with you, then maybe it was meant for you. I'll see you in the next story.